It is Talking Trash with Will Nash. Welcome back to a brand new episode. And when it comes to recycling, sometimes we really have to build that confidence with recycling. Many of us are doing it, but are there any things that are causing skepticism within the programs that are in your city, in your community, or in your country? Now, today we're joined by Alec Cooley, who of course is a senior advisor here at Busch Systems, to talk all about confidence in recycling. Alec, thank you so much for being here.
Will, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this.
It's going to be great. So for those who maybe don't know what you do in your role here at Busch Systems as our senior advisor, what is it that you do in a nutshell?
Fair question. So I've been with Busch now for 8 years. My background, I've worked in the recycling industry for over 30 years. I used to actually run a recycling program for university, actually driving the trucks around. But then I've also worked on a national level in the U.S. Around behavior. How do you work with local programs and help them to improve their programs and make them work better? And so a lot of the work that I'm doing here at Busch is still along those same lines. Mm-hmm. How do we develop that knowledge base, the best practices, to make sure that we've got programs that are effective and actually don't just collect trash, but they actually collect recyclables? And there's a surprising amount of complexity to that, and it's been my pleasure to work with Busch, helping customers and others in the industry do that over the last few years.
And you do such a great job with that, but I also love the fact that you started at grassroots out there, driving the truck, seeing what's going on in the cities and the different communities that are out there. And today it's all about confidence in recycling and building that confidence, identifying some of the causes and the factors that are out there as well. And one of the things that comes up with confidence in recycling is talking about a skepticism trend. So for those who may not be familiar with that, what exactly does that mean and how does it involve us?
Sure. So first I'll step back. Mm-hmm. And when we think about recycling in general, a huge part of this is how do we get people to actually participate? You can set out bins, you can have the whole system in place, but if people don't actually take that act to put it in their bottle or their piece of paper into their correct bin, you don't have a recycling program. And so for years, that's what we focused on, is how do we educate people, make sure they know what to recycle? How do you make sure that people have access? You got to make sure the bins are convenient to them. How do you get people into a routine? And this has sort of been our big focus for many years. There's been a lot of research that's been done that tells us that, the vast majority of people believe in recycling. They think it's something worth doing. Somewhere around 75-80% of people believe that. And it's those folks, but how do you actually convert that what they say into actual action? So that's what a lot of our work has been. You got roughly 20-25% of people who they're just not engaged. Yeah. And those folks, we don't really try and make an effort because it's just too hard to get them on board. What we're seeing, though, is this new trend just over the last 6 or 7 years where an increasing number of people are saying, I think it all goes in the trash. Why should I even bother? But there's one research from the Shelton group that's shown how the percentage of people who have that perception has gone from about 14% up to 32% in just a space of 4 or 5 years. And that's a pretty dramatic thing that has implications.
So where do you think that sort of perception or that mentality comes from? Like, what are the causes that are causing people to kind of, at one point they were like all about recycling and investing in the programs and having their blue bins or whatnot, depending on where you are. What do you think has helped shape that perspective, which obviously we want to hopefully change that in the other direction?
Absolutely. There have been a number of factors that have contributed to this. We've all seen over the last 5 or 6 years a lot of media stories about recycling is broken. We've heard stories about how China doesn't want the material. There's a lot of contamination. There have been stories from more of the from folks who have problems with plastics. And so sort of driving home the fact that, plastics recycling doesn't actually work, it's a fraud. So there's been a lot of these stories that have been out there that the people have been hearing. It's raised a lot of questions. At the same time, there's just a lot of confusion. It is, when you try and think about how do you recycle people are confused, and rightly so in a lot of ways. There are elements to how the recycling system has been designed that have contributed to that.
And I think the thing is, just from my research and just talking to different people, not only here at Busch Systems, but just in the recycling and environmental community, is it's not the same program, the same system necessarily everywhere you are. Like if you're listening or watching this podcast right now, it could be different a few cities over, a few states over, countries over, right? That's the thing I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize, even in terms of the coloring and the signage and, how to know, okay, does this go into compost? Does this go into waste? Is this plastics? Like that's one thing that I think people don't all realize.
And it's a huge problem, and it's people are right to be or rightfully confused because of that system. The way the industry is sort of set up is every individual community is responsible for setting up its program, and they decide how they're going to package and process material, which sellers they're going to sell it to, and all those factor in all these different considerations that result in programs being just slightly different in every instance. And that forces people to constantly relearn when you go from home to work to a concert or the airport. You constantly have to relearn what recycling is. And it just takes a lot more effort than we should have to.
It's true, but it is also up to us to put in that effort and get that education. And I think that it's also, for companies like our own Busch Systems to be transparent when it comes to the communication and the sort of information that we're putting out there. What are some of the things that we can do or that we are doing to make things a little more crystal clear for people so they know where their items should be going, or, to encourage more active recycling?
Sure. The first thing is we need to, as an industry, we need to do a lot more communicating in general. There's been research that shows that some people remember getting a newsletter a year ago or not, and so there's a vacuum of disinformation. A lot of folks just don't hear a lot, and so when you do hear negative stories, it fills this void, and it's not surprising that would influence people's perceptions. We need to give folks a lot more transparency how the system actually works, how to understand what happens when your cart gets emptied. Where does it go? How does it get sorted? Where does it get sent? Where does it get turned into? There's a lot of those details, I think, with more concrete understanding, and that's all there. It helps just to give you a more sense of, okay, it's real. It's not going behind this magical curtain and disappears into the ether and somehow it saves the earth. We need to give folks a lot more concrete understanding to give context when they hear, well, you can't put this in a bin because, it's because it has this problem technologically or whatever that is.
Well, the whole concept too, when it comes to waste diversion, and as well also not just, okay, I'm dropping this in this bin for X reason because you say it's good to. It's like understanding where does it go from the moment that you drop it into the bin to when it's actually recycled, and what does that look like, and what is that doing for the world, and what is that doing for the environment, and how can we continue to make it a greener place and just a greener space overall. When it comes to the whole concept of the skepticism trend and people, like we've talked about it a little bit, not being willing to put in the work, because really it is work. You have to be mindful of what you're doing when you are recycling and executing and implementing these programs. How can we help with that understanding today? How can we help, if you're listening right now, okay, you know what? This is why I should do it. This is why I should be more aware, more mindful of the recycling program in my community.
Well, first of all, recycling makes a difference. It is not a fraud. It actually is real. There are a lot of imperfections. There are a lot of things that don't work as well as they should, but nothing in this world does.
No.
My phone works fantastically until it doesn't. And recycling is much the same way. So having that basic understanding that have faith. When you put it into that bin, for the vast majority of the cases, it is getting turned into something, and that has a difference. Understanding that it does have an environmental impact. Using recycled material when you make a new thing requires far less energy. And when we talk about climate and greenhouse gases, that's a very material impact that's real. Recycling also is a huge job generator. If you take a ton of waste and you send it to a landfill, for every one job that creates, you're creating 10 jobs when you send that same material to be recycled, because somebody has to sort it. It's a whole manufacturing process that you support when you recycle. So understanding that when you participate, when you put it into that bin, you are part of a system that is generating economic activity, you're generating jobs. Across North America, hundreds of thousands of jobs are directly tied to the recycling.
I love that fact too, because I mean, in this economy, who doesn't love to hear that more jobs are being created, even just based on recycling in itself? And I think that that's such an important thing too, because we actually had a two-part episode with Michelle Dunn, and she was talking about the importance of, which, if you didn't listen to it, you haven't watched it, you can go back and do that on Talking Trash. But that education starts at such an early age, then to be able to take that education and move forward with it and create jobs with it, is so important and so key to our future, right? So we talked also about the concept of recycling. Does it work? Does it not work? Obviously, studies show, research shows that it does work. Can you give some examples of that, though, for people who may say, okay, so I know it's the right thing to do and I know it's good for the environment, but talk a little bit more about why it actually does work and why it is so important to do.
Sure. So I guess starting with just how the system itself works. When you put things into the bin and you send it to we call it MRF, is the industry shorthand, a material recovery facility, where in most communities, not everyone, each one's a little bit different, but where you sort things. It's a fascinating seeing the sorting process, especially the more modern, up-to-date facilities are incredibly high-tech, using robotics, artificial intelligence to be able to pick things out. And just technologically, it's fascinating to see how materials get sorted. And something that's changed a lot just in the space of my career is the definition of what can be recycled has dramatically changed. Right. It used to be very much it's about cans and bottles and paper and all. But nowadays, increasingly, you're seeing with technology, it's carpets, it's mattresses. So what can be recycled is increasing dramatically going forward.
It's not just that bottle of water, that plastic bottle of water that you finished and you're looking for the right bin to put it in. It's everything that's around us, and even so many things that you can't see right now in this room behind us. One of the things I know about you, kind of on a personal level, is that I know that you love to attend a lot of live concerts and live shows. And one of the things that's so interesting is one thing to have recycling in your office or recycling in your home, in your garage. How do you see that people respond to recycling, or just the act of recycling when they're in like a new place or new space, like a concert venue, like an arena? How do you, what does that boil down to kind of like get someone to understand that, okay, it might look different here than it does at home for me or in the office, and I'm not used to this, so I don't know if I'm going to do it. Like, is that ever a challenge for people?
Absolutely. Recycling behavior, we can spend the next week talking about this. It gets very in depth and a lot of different factors. But one thing that's noteworthy is just how our expectations change. A lot of recycling is driven by routine, by habit, and like anything, you kind of want to learn what I need to do. You figure out what you want to do, but we're all busy. We don't have a lot of time to focus on, rethinking through it all the time. So ideally what you want is when you go to a concert venue or somewhere else, you want it to just be an automatic behavior. And so you have to design the infrastructure to help people do that. The way people see and approach interface with recycling bins can have a big impact on whether or not they do that, because if you assume somebody's at a football game or whatever, hockey game, they're caught up in that. And so how do you get them just to focus? How do you get them to interface with the bins the way you want them to? You have to have them jump out. They need to, the bins themselves need to communicate, I'm recycling or I'm trash, and not just expect people to actually stop and focus their actual hard attention on that. You need to be able to make it an impulsive
Whether it's the signage, whether it's the colors, whether it's the fonts, that's what you have to
Those
do.
are
And
all
you have to
things
think
that
about
contribute.
that. There really is a psychology to it.
Yeah, there absolutely is.
And one of the things kind of on that note too, to just kind of maybe give people a little bit reminder, especially this summer if they're going to any concerts or any sporting events, is I've seen this especially within Toronto and the GTA, is a lot of venues now are encouraging you to bring your own reusable water bottle, and then they will refill it for free at the venue, which I think is just something that I don't know if you're finding that in the US as well, but we're finding that here in Canada at a lot of different venues as well. Is that something that happens south of the border?
Well, it just so happens I was at a festival this last weekend
There you go.
down in Baltimore, and in that case, the venue actually contracts with a company that provides reusable cups. So all the concessions now, instead of just being a plastic or paper cup that you use and you toss out, they're all durable cups that can be reused, and they have special bins set out throughout the facility. And so that's a much better alternative. I mean, recycling's good, but it still takes energy. It still takes resources to turn something into something new. When you can simply wash that cup and bring it back, when you're done, you get up from your seats and you're exiting the venue, you can just toss it into the bin. That's a much better environmentally at the end of the day. And so that's a new growing trend that we're starting to see across the US, Canada, and Europe as well.
I love that. And that's the thing. I think a lot of it is learning. A lot of it is retraining our thinking and being a little more self-aware when we're doing these things. And we've talked a lot about, of course, the confidence in recycling on the episode today. When it comes to the concept of building confidence in recycling, what are some things that could potentially be a challenge to that and helping people understand, why it is important?
So I come back to a point I made earlier about I think we need more transparency. I think people need to better understand how the system works. We need to better connect people to the outcomes. Again, for most people, you want to know that you're doing a good thing. You don't need to become totally fluent, have a deep knowledge about all the environmental benefits or all the jobs and all. But people just need to know that when I make that effort, it's leading to something. It has a result. And that's why one of the I think the real dangers about the skepticism trend is if you think it's really going in the trash, it doesn't matter if you are a diehard environmentalist or whatever. Nobody wants to feel like we're wasting our time. Right. So we have to be able to validate people's effort and give them the confidence it actually is happening. So you have to show that evidence that it's working. When I made reference to sort of that 80-20%, there's a percentage of people who they're not going to make the effort. They don't think it's worth it. That's my fear, is that if you get the perception, if it settles into your mind that, it's all going in the landfill, you convert people over to that, from the 80 over to the 20, and you start to lose people, and it gets much harder now to engage them. So it's important that we give people that sense of confidence. It really is happening, and that's important.
Reminder, I love that. It actually is happening. Alec, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Alec Cooley, Senior Advisor here at Busch Systems. Don't forget to subscribe, to make sure you give us a rating. We would like 5 stars here for Talking Trash with Will Nash, so you never miss an episode every time it comes out. Thanks again, Alec. It is Will Nash, Talking Trash with Will Nash.